Welcome to Between Two Ferms. We're between fermenter number 4 with Spare Rib Pale Ale and number 11 with F5 IPA. I'm Blake, head brewer here at COOP Ale Works.
My name's Shawn. I'm the quality control tech.
And today we're going to be talking about ID number 4, Oak Age Sour Farmhouse Ale.
All right.
So I'll go ahead and give a little disclaimer on this one. There's going to be some nerd alerts and some words that Shawn says that I may have him slow down.
Spicy one.
As we drink this beer, I think we kind of have a lot of ground to cover. There are some things that I think are really cool about this beer and unique and even a little risky, I'll even say.
No risk involved in this whatsoever.
So, just maybe this will be a little bit different format than maybe if you watched any of the other Between Two Ferms. So,
I accidentally gave you the short pour.
I see. Well, let's cheers it up.
Cheers. Oh man, pours way better from the bottle than it does the tap.
Indeed.
Aaron won't be pleased to hear that, but that's fine.
So, for those of you who don't know, we've started, or maybe you do, we've started an ID series where it's kind of the Freudian concept of ID, where we kind of do things based on what we want to brew at the current time and place, or trend in brewing, or something we've always held on to. And I kind of come from the more production side of things, where making efficiencies and kind of being able to replicate flavor profiles. And Shawn, I would say, prides himself in the mixed culture. For lack of a better way to say it, nerdy side of fermentation and all things kind of
technical.
Yeah, okay, technical. That's
technical side.
Technical side. And so the ID series has kind of evolved. We've done persimmon barrel-aged Brett beer, we've done a fresh hop ale, we've done a kettle sour Berliner Weiss, and now this is the 4th one, which when we made it kind of became known as Saison. For those of you who are familiar with the style Saison, kind of conflated that with Shawn's name because this was kind of his project. He said, I want to make a barrel-aged Saison. And I said, go for it. I've tried some of his own homebrewed beers and some of the ones he's helped us with here commercially. And this has kind of been his baby. So without further ado, I'll kind of pass it to him to kind of talk about what came about in developing this beer. And if I have any things that I'm thinking of, I may interject.
Oh, you're going to cut in, huh?
I might.
You're going to block my shine.
We'll see.
So obviously, I started out as a home brewer, like a lot of people that wind up working in breweries, and I actually started doing that because pretty much at the time, probably circa, 2011, 2012, you could buy pretty much one Saison in Oklahoma, and that was Saison DuPont, which is an all-time classic. I mean, you got to respect the classics.
Yeah.
And at $10 a bomber, that was pretty damn expensive for a broke college student. And I was studying microbiology at the time, and eventually, it took way too long, but eventually I thought, oh yeah, beer. It's like it's science, it's microbiology, and it's like a science project that at the end of the day, maybe I'll get a buzz off of.
And in case you haven't gathered, Shawn knows a thing or two about science as a microbiologist.
Amongst other things. I dilly and dally there and there. But that was pretty much all I wound up homebrewing. I think I've made 1 or 2 IPAs in my entire time homebrewing. 1 stout that wound up having exploding bottles. Sorry about that, Barry, if you're watching this. 1 bottle blew up in his basement when he tried to move it. He scooted it on a shelf. Fortunately, I wrapped them all in paper. It's like all the shards were in a nice, handy, wet package.
That was nice of you.
It was.
That was polite.
So nice to give people bombs that were at least wrapped.
Yeah.
So after that, I thought, you know what, I'm going to stick to the thing that I know and I do okay. And so I brewed lots and lots of Saisons and mixed and sour wild beers. That's pretty much all I do, which I guess at some point coined the moniker Saison, which is that. So this beer is actually, bluntly, not at all what I originally intended. It was more of like a situation of happenstance. I was over at the barrel house trying some of these barrels, and I happened to try, we had these Saison barrels that had a really funky mixed culture in them. And so like funky, like a lot of like hay, like barnyard is kind of the classic descriptor.
This is where I'm going to stop you. First time.
Uh-oh.
A lot of times when we're designing beers, Shawn will come to me and say, what do you envision for this beer? Or this is what I envision for this beer. And we kind of talk about this scale of funk and sour. And so there's, some level that each could be at. And so I'll kind of say, I like to work in percentages like 25% on the funk sale, 75% on the sour, or, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And then you'll kind of put together the yeast and bacteria mix based on said parameters. Do they always turn out that way? No. But this is kind of what we start out with. And the most fun thing about these beers is that you really don't know how they're going to turn out.
Indeed.
But this one turned out great.
Yeah.
So, sorry, that I needed to talk about the funk and sour.
No doubt.
That's kind of how we talk about designing beers.
No doubt. And so the original barrels that we had put together and the original grain bills and thing, tasted good, but it was extremely dry and it was not sour at all. I mean, not at all. Very funky, kind of like a leathery, like an old porter sherry maybe, but not at all sour. And like I said, by happenstance, I was over there tasting some barrels one day, pulling samples, and I happened to be over there and I pulled some of these barrels. And then we had another beer that was another rye blonde sour beer that we'll probably release on some kind of fruit or something at some point. Mm-hmm. But it was very sour. And I was kind of like, wow, by itself, that might be a little too much. And then drunk me got to thinking, oh, well, maybe what could help was if you just bring forward a little bit of acidity in this funky beer. And I kind of played around with some ratios and wound up with this thing here, and I think it is definitely greater than the sum of its parts. The one beer is just kind of funky with not a lot of other really interesting character to it, and then this particular, the rye blonde beer, was very sour with a lot of lime, lemon, grapefruit, citric notes, and so we wound up going through a couple of iterations of different blends of it and kind of settled on this one, and I think it works really well right now. And I think it's going to continue to improve probably over the next 6 months to a year. And this beer is bottle conditioned, so if you hang on to it, it will continue to develop kind of new and interesting aroma and flavors. Particularly as things like we did dry hop it after we put it in a tank with some old world hops.
I was going to say, yeah, I think we need to mention they were old world. It was
yeah.
meant to be floral, super subtle. And I want to come back to the bottle conditioning because I think this was something that I learned on the project that was interesting, but before we go there, what was the barrel mix like?
So we had 2 oak casks, so actually 2 formerly tequila barrels.
Okay, because I was going to say, I pick up a little, for whatever reason, tequila barrels give me a peppery flavor, like cracked pepper, and I get a little bit in this in the perfect amount, but I was wondering if there were tequila barrels in there.
There are indeed. There's also a lot of rye, which can give you that little bit of spicy character.
Yep.
And I didn't realize that until I looked back at some of the grain bills, because these have been in barrels for a year plus.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh wow, the rye blonde was 20% rye, and I think the kind of base Saison was another 15, 10, 20% rye, right in that area. So a lot of rye for a little bit of a spicy note too. Like I said, I think the end result is kind of greater than the sum of its parts. I wish I could say oh, this is exactly what I meant it to be, but that is not the case. And to me, that's kind of sort of there's brewing is an art and a science, and this is definitely the art part, is taking these different flavor profiles and kind of blending them together and sort of imagining at the end, I think, based on my previous knowledge, that this is what's going to turn out from it. And I was super pumped the first time we tried it in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Just to see if it was carbonated at all,
Yeah.
and it wound up just about shooting a cork up to the ceiling. We thought, it's carbonated.
And so this is the part I want to go to, the bottle conditioning part, which we didn't actually add any priming sugar.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where I want to start. For those of you who are familiar with diastaticus, so this would be the nerd alert section.
Nerd alert.
Nerd alert. The diastaticus has kind of been in the brewing news lately as you look at a big brewery and a main yeast provider have had some diastaticus issues where it was not the desired end to have said yeast in the beer. Shawn, in all of his wisdom, knew that this diastaticus yeast was in the beer, and so because some of the barrels did not have diastaticus in them and others did, the difference in gravity for the work that would do, and I don't really know how to sort of explain this in layman's terms or in sort of more toned down terms, but diastaticus is almost like a super yeast that can attenuate a little further than other yeasts. It as I understand, is have an enzyme that can break down those extra carbohydrates to then metabolize them. Yeah, so diastaticus, what's kind of extra unique about it is pretty much all strains of Saccharomyces, and diastaticus is a strain of Saccharomyces cerevisiae, so the same yeast that we use in all of our beers, but this variant diastaticus has this extra enzyme, this glucoamylase, that all Saccharomyces have, but diastaticus actually excretes it outside of the cell. So it's the excretion. Yeah, and so that means that you can have just a couple of cells of diastaticus and it excretes this enzyme, and all of a sudden all of the other yeast you might have in your package, they start seeing fresh food and they'll just continue to ferment, and you can wind up with bottles or cans exploding or other really, really undesired outcomes. Phenolic off flavors, like you'll have a beer that's supposed to taste like chocolate and it'll taste like Band-Aids instead. Not exactly a great adjunct beer, a Band-Aid stout. So it's not necessarily that the diastaticus can actually metabolize the dextrins. Mm-hmm. It's that they secrete the amylase to be able to break down the more sugars or more long chain sugars to then be able to metabolize them. Yep, so that's why just even the smallest amount of that diastaticus can prove catastrophic for any kind of beer run. Yeah, if you're not intending it to be in there. Indeed. So, in full disclosure, we expose this to our tanks, we expose this to our packaging equipment, and we nuked the hell out of all of that stuff. Yes, we did. In hopes that we could A, give you a tasty beer, but B, also make our other beers taste like we intended them to. So far, so good. Yeah, so far, so good. Let's hope all of your lab equipment is picking up what it should. Yes, that's always the hope. That's what I dread every day. Yeah. Is that day when I come in and I go, oh Lord. Oh Lord. All right. Yeah. Time to sound the alarm. Anyway, this has been ID number 4, super tasty beer. We didn't talk much about the flavor profile. It's awesome. I mean, there's a lot going on there. It is, I would say, probably a 7 out of 10 on the sour scale. It's all going to depend on your palate, but it's fairly sour. It's not going to melt the enamel on your teeth, but it is sour. Oh yeah, it's definitely got a pucker factor. And the funk is there. Some have likened some strawberry notes. I'd also say there's some floralness to the hops, even a little bit of pepper in there. Really great beer. Kudos to you and your team. Thank you. Cheers. This has been Between Two Ferms. Until next time. Man, finished yours already, huh? Yeah, it was pretty tasty. I don't blame you. Still got a little left. Yeah, I had a little siren left. Little sirens. What are you guys doing? What? We're drinking beers, man. Beer? What are you doing?
I'm brewing beer. Get your safety glasses on.
Oh, shit.
Oh, man.
Justin put you up to this.
I bet he did. Man,
safety first, guys.
You squares in your safety, I swear. You remember back in the old days we didn't have to wear safety glasses? Or, hey, that's my beer, man.
No, seriously.
Oh, beer Bogart.
Yum.
Man.
Tasty.
Will anyone ever tell you you're a real asshole?
Every day.
Every day.
Is that person me?
Yes, it is you. All right.
Fair enough.
All right.
All right.
Have fun brewing.
Make some more beer for us, please.
Cheers.